Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Monsul, the producer and the host of this wonderful program. It's been on Channel 10 for a long, long time, since way back in 1989. And as you can see by the numbers in front of my desk here, this is show number 800 that we're celebrating tonight. And I was trying to decide what we would do for this program, so I decided to donate and to commemorate this particular show to my sweetheart, this beautiful lady that you see in this picture alongside of me here on my desk. Her name is Dolores. Dee Dee, it's her nickname, Dee Dee Monsul. And we met way back in 1950. That's 70 years ago. And when we first met, when she was 20 years old, as she was in this picture, and I was 21 years old. It was a long, long time ago. And let me tell you how we first met. We first met way back, as I said, back in 1950 on July the 2nd, Labor Day, and July 4th weekend. We met on the boardwalk in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I don't know how many people are familiar with the boardwalk. It's the longest boardwalk in the world. The boardwalk in Atlantic City is about 6 miles long. And I was there with my boyfriend, Harold Lease, and she was there with her girlfriend, Ann Kerrigan, and we were kind of following each other on the boardwalk. And I said to Harold, I said, look at those two nice ladies up ahead there. Maybe we should walk up and say hello. And Harold said, yeah, that's a good idea, John. So we caught up with the two ladies, and the two ladies turned around, and they saw that we were there. And I was so impressed with this beautiful lady. When I saw her for the very first time, I think I fell in love with that beautiful face for the very first time. And the beautiful love story began right then and there on July 4th weekend of 1950 on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. And I walked up to the lady that was going to be my future wife, the one in this picture here, and I said, good evening, ladies. And she said, good evening. I said, where are you ladies going this evening? Well, we're trying to find some place where we can get something to drink because we're very thirsty. I said, well, that's wonderful. I said, I think I know a couple of places where we can go. And I said, could we walk with you? And she said, okay. So Harold and I joined forces with Dee Dee and her girlfriend, Ann Kerrigan. And we went and we found something nice place to get something to drink because the girls were thirsty. And after that, I said, you're staying in a hotel here in Atlantic City? And Dee Dee said yes. And I said, what hotel? The Lafayette Hotel on North Carolina Avenue in Atlantic City. I said, well, I know where that's only a couple of blocks from here. I said, would you mind if we walk you home? And Dee Dee and Ann said, no, that's okay. So we walked them to the Lafayette Hotel. And as we were saying goodnight, nice meeting you gals, Dee Dee said, you know, there's a little game room on the top floor of the Lafayette Hotel where we have different games you can play. Would you boys be interested in playing ping pong or something of that sort? And Harold and I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So we got on the elevator and we went up to the rooftop of the Lafayette Hotel, and Harold and Ann started playing ping pong. And I said to Dolores, I said to Dee Dee, I said, honey, I said, would you come over here for a moment and sit down alongside of me? I want to tell you something. So she came over and sat down. I took her by the hand, and I smiled at her, and I looked in those beautiful brown eyes, and I said, Dolores, I said, you want to know something? She said, no, what, honey? And I said, someday I'm going to marry a girl just like you. And her mouth dropped, and she was speechless. She didn't say anything. She sat there and smiled back at me, and I smiled back at her. And I think we fell in love with each other right there, that very first night that we met on the boardwalk and at the Lafayette Hotel 70 years ago. And we exchanged phone numbers and names and addresses and so forth. So it was a very beautiful beginning of this love story that I'm telling you tonight on our program, Communicating Today. That was July 2nd, 1950. And then about 2 months later, I had an opportunity, we kept in touch in the meantime, to come and visit Dee Dee in her hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, about 130 miles from Philadelphia, where I had my home. And I was going to college, and she was going to college, and we were still young people. She said, come up and see me sometime, Johnny. I said, okay. So the end of September of 1950, a couple months after we first met, I drove up to Scranton, PA, and we met and had a wonderful weekend in Scranton. It was a beautiful weekend. We went to a football game. We met her mom and dad, her mom Jenny and her dad Jake, and we met all of her uncles and aunts. She introduced me to everybody and her grandma, and it was just beautiful. Her little puppy dog, Toby, little cocker spaniel. There's my sweetie. She's saying, yes, Johnny, everything you're saying is absolutely true. And we went dancing on Saturday night, and we had a wonderful time. And on Sunday, we went for a canoe ride on Lake Wallenpaupack, which is the largest natural water lake in Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania. And then before the night was over, on Sunday evening, before the weekend was over, that beautiful first weekend in Scranton, we went to a movie. And the first movie that we ever saw in Scranton was at the movie theater there, the Comerford Theater on Wyoming Avenue. The first picture we saw was T42. I don't know if any of you folks ever heard of that picture, but it's an old picture way back 70 years ago in September of 1950, and it starred this wonderful, beautiful lady, that's for sure. Her name was Doris Day. And she sang this beautiful song, the theme song from that movie, which was called T for Two. And that was such a beautiful movie, and we loved that picture, we loved that song. That became our favorite love song for so many years. We were married for 59 and a half years. She passed away in April of 2015, about 5 years ago. We loved T for Two, that song. And just in case you might know why we loved it and why we thought so much of that movie, here's what that song sounds like. It goes something like this. Picture you upon my knee, T for two and two for tea, me for you and you for me, alone we will raise a family, a boy for you and a girl for me. Can't you see how happy we will be? And there's a lot more to the song than that. Just a couple of little brief description of it. We always loved that song, so much so that even after she got sick, before she passed away 5 years ago, we were starting to think about maybe we should get in touch with this wonderful entertainer, Doris Day. She was one of the top singers in America at that time, comparable to Frank Sinatra on the male side. She was the best female singer for a long, long time, had a wonderful career. And I said to Dee Dee, and she said to me, we ought to get in touch with Doris Day sometime and thank her so much for making that wonderful movie and producing and recording that wonderful song, T for Two. But unfortunately, Dee Dee passed away before we had a chance to write that beautiful letter. So after she was gone, a couple of months later, I made up my mind that I would write that letter. I would find out where Doris Day lives in California, and write a beautiful letter and send some pictures to her, and request a beautiful autographed copy of her picture, and maybe a nice little letter to go along with it. So that's what I did. I sat down and wrote this beautiful letter to Doris Day. But before I tell you about this letter and what happened after we wrote the letter, after my wife was gone, let me put a couple of pictures up right about now. So back in the control room, here's picture number one to tell you a little bit. In fact, this is the same picture you see now on my desk. When my Dee Dee was 20 years old, I was 21, and that was way back in 1970, a long time, 70 years ago, 1950 I should say. That's when she was so beautiful when I looked at her, and that's what she was wearing the night I met her. She was wearing an off-the-shoulder white blouse and beautiful white shoes, and she was dressed beautifully, and I fell in love with my sweetheart, and she fell in love with me, I think, at that first night that we met on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. Next picture. Here we go. Here's a picture of the two of us when she was getting ready to go to Russia with her mom. This was back in 1972. By this time we were married, because we got married in 1955, about 5 years after we met. we got married, and here we were married now about 10 or 12 years, and getting ready to go to Russia with her mom. And let's put the next picture up. Here we go. Here's a nice, beautiful picture back in the mid-'70s when we went on a beautiful trip to the Sheraton Waikiki on Waikiki Beach in beautiful Hawaii. And it was a wonderful, beautiful trip that we spent about a week or 10 days in Hawaii. And a wonderful memory of that beautiful trip about 17 years after we were married. Next picture, Kenny. Here's just a beautiful picture when we went to Virginia Beach and stayed at a Hyatt hotel. Had a wonderful, wonderful weekend there. We loved Virginia Beach. We went there many times, many trips over there. And let's see another picture, Kenny. Here's a picture that we took back in the mid-1980s, and we went out to a beautiful museum, the Corcoran Art Gallery, which is in downtown D.C., and a beautiful works of art, beautiful statues and all kinds of beautiful paintings and works of art. And you see behind us a beautiful sculptor, and it was some kind of a special occasion, and we were all dressed up and ready to have a wonderful time, which we did have. And let's have another picture, Kenny. Later on in the 1980s, we loved to cruise. We didn't have any kids. We always wanted children, but we couldn't have any kids. We planned on having children, and if we did have them, we even had the names picked out of what they would be called. If it was a boy, we would call the boy Mark. The boy would have been named Mark Monsul, my last name, and if it was a girl, she would have been named Jenny, after her mom, and that's her mom down the bottom of this picture, her mom Jenny, and we would have called our daughter Jenny Monsul. So Mark Monsul and Jenny Monsul, but it didn't happen. So what we decided to do instead, we decided to travel. So we traveled around the world, and we saw many different places. We went to Europe, we went to Asia, we went to Australia, we went to Canada, we went to Alaska, we went to New Zealand, we went to South America, we went to Argentina and Brazil. You name it, we saw it, and we were there because we couldn't have kids. We figured, well, we might as well enjoy life, we might as well travel and make the most of our life. So that's what we did.